So today we're going to go over how I like to structure a push session. In other words, a session where you train the pecs, the front delt, the middle delt, and then the triceps. At least that's what I consider a push day. In addition to that, what we're going to talk about is specific exercises for each of those muscle groups, as well as the functional anatomy and how these things stretch and shorten individually. So when we're looking at the pecs specifically, we have the lower pec, which runs a little bit more low to high, the middle pec, which runs more horizontally, and then the upper pec, which runs from the clavicle downward. With the front delt, we obviously just have that sort of direction where we are coming from the outer portion of the clavicle down to the upper arm, the middle delt from the side of the shoulder blade down to the arm, and then the triceps, obviously the guys that extend the elbow on the back side of the arm, the lateral and medial heads, which attach to the humerus directly, or at the upper arm directly, and then the long head, which attaches to the shoulder blade, which we'll get to later. So starting with the pecs, we want to pick a motion that's more high to low in terms of a press or a fly type motion. If you are going to pick a fly type motion, I would recommend you do it with a soft elbow and make it a little bit more of a press type motion as opposed to a fly type motion that's coming out and wide. I like that specifically because the pecs do gain leverage when the arm is a little bit tighter to the body. So whether you're talking about the lower pec, the middle pec, or the upper pec, using an arm path that's way up and out here or way up and out here is not going to be the best thing to do from a mechanical leverage standpoint. Moving to the more middle or sternal division of the pec, what I would say is you want to basically mimic very similar mechanics to that lower pec path, except you just want to change the angle slightly. So rather than pressing high to low, you want to press sort of middle to middle, if that makes sense. So the middle pec is going to be the one that stretches the most behind the body and sort of slightly outward, and then comes across and toward the middle. And so when we're picking exercises for the middle pec, we apply all the same principles because in reality it's very similar to the lower pec, but it's just a slightly different angle. The same holds true for the upper pec, which is that we do want to still keep the arms relatively tighter to the body, right? Not way up and out here, but we do want to come sort of now up and across as opposed to inward and across or downward and across. So regardless of which pec you're talking about, specifically, we just want to consider that, okay, they do gain leverage when the arms are a little bit tighter to the body or slightly out wider, depending on which one you're talking about. They don't really act too well when the arm is up and out here. So for the lower pec specifically, I like a declined cable press. For the middle and upper pec specifically, I like a slightly more inclined or mid-ish incline cable press. You can also do those with dumbbells if that's, if cables aren't an option for you. And I'll obviously be showing, these exercise demos on the screen here. But for the lower, middle, and upper pecs, I do like anything that is converging. So if you have a machine converging press, be it, hammer strength or Nautilus or Atlantis, whatever it happens to be, any press that really gets the arm stretched close and behind the body and comes in and toward the middle of the sternum is going to give you a really, really good pec stimulus as a whole. Now, for the front delt specifically, front delt is not going to function too differently from the pecs, just in terms of the fact that we're going to train both with a pressing or a fly type motion. Both of those obviously work fairly well and have for people historically, but for the front delt, I like to do something that's a little bit more vertical, so something like a more inclined dumbbell press, where we're not necessarily aiming to keep the arm out wide, but a little bit tighter to the body, so not something that's coming sort of up and outward this way, but more something that's in the plane of the scapula, right, where the scapula can move a little bit better. So rather than doing a press that's like up and out here to the side, I'm going to do something that I can actually use to stretch my arm behind my body slightly. So it's going to be a little bit of a wider press, and it can be angled a little bit more upward, because remember, the pecs aren't really going to take the arm up and overhead. They're going to just kind of take the arm up and across the body to some degree. So when we're doing a delt type motion, front delt type motion, we want to make it more vertical, but not so vertical that we're like 90 degrees from the floor and we're pressing this way, right? We still want to be able to actually load that arm slightly behind the body. So I recommend a high incline, maybe something like 60 or so degrees. Now, moving on to the middle delt, right, which is obviously the one that attaches to the outer border of the shoulder blade and runs down to the arm. That's going to be like your lateral raise type muscle. Now, depending on where you do the lateral raise in terms of like plane of motion, whether it's more in front or more onto the side, what I would recommend is just find the position that's most comfortable for you. Most people will probably not be too comfortable at the extreme, so whether it's like really, really in front of the body here or really, really out to the side here, find something in between that's sort of like you're doing like a Y raise type motion, and just do that motion with a cable or a dumbbell. I personally prefer cables because you can make the resistance profile, however you like it to be. So if you can make it heavier mechanically at the bottom, that would be great because you're typically stronger there. And you can make it lighter at the top where you get weaker. You can also do something like a Y raise, right? So instead of coming up and out to the side, you can come across your body and down and sort of outward. That would be another fantastic option for the middle delt. So again, just in terms of order so far, I like to do something for the middle and upper pecs, something for the lower pecs. You could use one or two of those depending on how specific your pec goals are. If you have a high priority in training in terms of pecs specifically, what I would recommend is doing something for the lower and the middle and the upper, maybe separately on 2 different days, but just making sure that you cover each of those specific pads throughout a week, I think is really where the money is at there. In terms of the front delt, I personally don't really train the front delt too specifically with many motions because I think a lot of the times the front delt just kind of ends up coming along for the ride whenever we're getting really, really deep into failure sets for pecs. So although they might not be a limiter in any sort of pec based motion, they are involved. So although I showed a front delt motion on the video here, I don't always include those type motions in every single phase, but more so just from the standpoint of being able to actually press, in a little bit more of a vertical plane, I think is important at some point in a mesocycle, if not for hypertrophy, then just for, the health of your shoulders and those type things. So I would do something pec, something delt, front delt related, and then I would go to something middle delt related. Again, maybe that cable lateral raise or the cable Y raise. You could do that with a dumbbell, on an incline bench or, on a chest supported variation. You could do the Y raise, you could do the middle delt raise on the incline bench where you're sort of lean back and your arm is stretching a little bit behind your body. Both of those are great. And then for the triceps, we have 3 different triceps. And they are going to function very slightly differently, but I don't really think that that's a huge consideration to make when we're looking at how to actually structure a push day. Personally, I like to do something like a cross cable extension with the arm in kind of like a neutral position, either single arm or double arm. If you have a functional trainer like I do, you can move the lever basically wherever you want. And so what I like to do is put them at an angle where I can use both of them at the same time. But if I don't want to do that, or if I don't have space for that, or if I'm in a gym that just has a single cable stack like a lot of gyms do, I'll just do it single arm. That is perfectly fine. You can just go back and forth and you basically end up not spending any extra time on that exercise. Now, in addition to that sort of neutral extension with the arm at the side, I like to do something either with my arm up and across my body or up and sort of behind my head to capture more of that stretched position. So, when we're looking at the triceps, the long head is going to be the one that stretches most in this plane overhead. And the other heads, although they do have some sort of fascial connection to the long head, aren't really going to be able to achieve the same degree of stretch. So just making sure basically that you do an extension with your arm at your sides and an extension at some degree of higher arm elevation angle. Obviously with a cable, that would be the easiest option to do. But if you also didn't have access to cables, you could just use a dumbbell, lean over on a bench, do it single arm overhead. That would be probably the most orthopedically sound way to do it, as opposed to that one, that French press where people are doing this thing. So just overall, that's kind of how I would structure a push day. Hopefully this, laying out these different exercises and these different options can give you an idea of how these muscles are going to stretch and contract. Remember that I'm not trying to just say, hey, here are a bunch of exercises, go and copy them. But more so, these are principles that I think apply across tons of different exercises, because ultimately there are an unlimited amount of exercises that you can do, options that you could create, but they're across the board are going to be very similar themes. As an example, like, the lower pack is always going to be stretching in this position. So just like find this position, find something to create a resistance in that direction where your arm is going, and then do the motion that would contract the lower pec. For the upper pec, do the same thing. Keep your arm, sort of down at your side, load something down that way, and then press up in that direction. If it's not a cable and you can't press across your body, then just use, a dumbbell and use the portion of the range that's actually loaded, right? There are tons of different ways to actually load these motions once you know the motions, but just ultimately trying to first figure out, hey, where does this muscle stretch the most and where does it have the most leverage? In addition to, hey, where does it then go and pull the bone to? Where does it contract to in its shortest position? So again, lower pecs somewhere here, middle pecs somewhere here, upper pecs somewhere here, front delt slightly wider and either sort of in this plane or, you know, a plane that's more overhead, pressing type variations, fly type variations. And then again, for the triceps, what I would say is neutral extension, you know, overhead extension, and then for the middle delt, some kind of raise, you know, either behind the body, across the body, or with dumbbells just in your standard sort of traditional lateral raise. So again, hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions about any of these exercises, the structure, you know, my intent with laying out different exercises and in different orders based on your specific goals, you can throw a question in the comments and I'll get to it and answer it as best I can.